Hello, this is Mr. Smith, also known as Teach Smith on YouTube. Year 10, we are moving from comparison poetry to English Language Paper 2, Question 5, for the week beginning the 29th of June 2020. This is because we have started English Language Paper 2 in school, and also because you've now spent a reasonable amount of time on comparison poetry. So, before we start that, we are still continuing with our Inspector Calls SPaG revision exercise. So remember, you can either print the paragraph off, rewrite it with all the corrections, or simply write down the errors corrected. Please pause the video and have a go. So reveals, spelled correctly there, capital E for Eva, apostrophe is very important because Mr. Burling owns the factory, and the rest of those corrections. Please make sure you've made all those corrections and have a think about when you do your own writing whether you make those mistakes and to watch out for them. So what do we mean by English Language Paper 2 Question 5? Well, English Language Paper 2 is writers' viewpoints and perspectives. That's what you're looking at. What view does someone have on a topic? What is their perspective about it? What do they think about it based on what they're writing? In school or at home, you're looking at section A, and then at home only, you'll be looking at section B, question 5, which is the transactional writing. It's about your own viewpoint. What is your own viewpoint on something? What is your perspective on something? How can you get that across in your writing? Just as you've looked at it in the reading section, the viewpoint or perspective of another writer, how can you get that across your own view in your own writing? The writing section will always be linked to the reading section topic. So the reading section you've been looking at has been on surfing, and so the writing section is on sport. There will always be 40 marks for the question, so we recommend 40 to 45 minutes. Please remember that this must include both planning time and checking time. So the actual writing, the full sentences, the actual writing of the answer should be around half an hour. That will allow time for you to plan beforehand and to check afterwards. There are 24 marks for content. How strong are your ideas? How strong are your techniques? How well organised is your work? And then 16 marks for SPaG. That is full stops, capital letters, apostrophes, but also things like, have you spelled ambitious vocabulary correctly? Have you used a semicolon? Have you used a colon? Have you used an ellipsis I should say? Have you used speech marks correctly? All of those different punctuation marks. And it does count. It does get you better marks. The outline of the question will always be the same. There will always be a thought-provoking statement. It will then tell you the genre, usually tell you the audience and the purpose of the piece. I'll shortly be showing you an example of this to help you to understand what I mean. So this is a screen grab from the actual exam paper, the section B. Now, as you notice, it says to spend 45 minutes. I would say that is the absolute maximum amount of time, perhaps 40 minutes. So you're looking at a minute per mark is perhaps a way to look at it. And remember, that has to include planning and checking. So we now have our thought-provoking statement. All sport should be fun, fair and open to everyone. These days, sport seems to be more about money, corruption and winning at any cost. Write an article for a newspaper in which you explain your point of view on this statement. 24 marks for content, 16 marks for technical accuracy, leading to 40 marks. Plan is said twice, and there's a section of the paper which is set out for you to plan. Please, please, please plan. Not only will it make your work better, I can promise you it will make your work better, but it leaves a good impression with the examiner. Do you get specific marks for it? No. However, it will benefit you, your quality of writing will be better, and it will leave a good impression with the examiner. It's an article in a newspaper, and you need to explain your point of view. That's what I mean by genre, audience and purpose. What do we mean by an article? A headline or powerful title. Please do not get stuck on this. Perhaps leave a bit of space if you can't think of one straight away and come back to it. A stand first. Simply an overview paragraph, a kind of summary, an introduction, a brief paragraph that outlines what you're going to talk about. And I'm going to show an example of that later in the video. An effective sequence of paragraphs. It needs to be planned out. It can't jump around. It can't be random. And again, I'll show you what I mean by this. Formal in tone, but still engaging. Okay, you have to kind of ride the line between being funny or interesting and thoughtful, but not wacky, I suppose, and also try not to be dull. So what do we mean by writing to explain? You have to show you understand both sides of the argument, both sides of the point of view. Okay, you can't be strongly biased. You can't only show one side of things. Facts and statistics are good in explanations, as are use of experts. Remember, you can make these up. They have to sound reasonable. They can't be ridiculous, but they can be a made-up fact, a made-up statistic, a made-up expert, or perhaps you know real ones, and that's fine. A strong vocabulary is always a good idea, particularly using an article. Quite sophisticated language, quite mature language, quite mature vocabulary will do well. Again, carefully planned, a clear sequence of ideas, and it's always good to use discourse markers. Okay, basically firstly, secondly, thirdly, lastly, that sort of thing. So that's the success criteria for an article and the success criteria for writing to explain. Remember, you can go back to this video at any time, you can pause it, have a think about it when you come to do a writing task later in the week. The statement should provide you with the arguments you need to make or the points that you need to address. This statement has a lot to use, almost too much I would say, and I'll explain what I mean in a moment. You have the idea of sport being fun, sport being fair, sport being accessible to all, the idea of money in sport, corruption in sport, and winning or cheating essentially at any cost. There's 6 different things to talk about there, and within those 6 things there's a lot to talk about within them. What does it mean by what sports are fun? How are they fun? How are sports fair? Are they ever fair? What sports are accessible or open to everyone? Take time. You know, there's nothing wrong with mind mapping around the statement or mind mapping around each point, each moment. That will yield lots of ideas. You need to think of lots of things and then organize them. Another way you can do this is perhaps through a table. I've put the sort of positive and negative statements either side. Fun, fair, open to everyone, money, corruption, winning at any cost. Pause the video here and think about, how is sport fun? How is sport fair? How is sport open to everyone? Even if you don't agree, try and think of as many arguments as you can. Remember, this is writing to explain, so you need to show both sides. And then think about how sport has a lot of money in it, corruption, and perhaps even cheating. Again, if you don't agree, try and still think of as many arguments as you can. Please pause the video and do so now. So these are the things I came up with. In terms of accessibility, I thought of both the Paralympics and the Olympics, particularly how the Paralympics has gained in popularity recently and status. Think about your experience of school PE. I had both positive and negative ones. Perhaps think about positive ones in this case. Think about how widely accessible, how widely enjoyed football is all over the world. Millions of people, if not 1 billion people maybe, I don't know. And then perhaps something more personal to me, and you may think of something more personal to you. The sort of positives about boxing, the fitness, the skill, and the community aspect of it. Look at the other side. The cost of training in various sports can leave people out. PEDs are performance enhancing drugs. Things like steroids, which of course led me to think about Lance Armstrong, who was a cyclist who won the Tour de France many times, but then was stripped of his titles because of the drugs he was using. Wages in football is always one to talk about. And then boxing, again, perhaps more personal to me. There's been match fixing, awful injuries, people not taking fights because of money, absurd amounts of money for a fight, that sort of thing. Now, as you notice, there's a lot of things to talk about on that page. Lots and lots of different things, which brings me to my next point. I looked at the examiner's report because remember this is from a real exam, and I just wanted to pull up some more ideas for you as well. So when you come to do some writing at the end of the week, you have more ideas. Got PE lessons. Remember I talked about the Paralympics, also about women. Let's talk about the Women's World Cup recently, players' wages, and then gambling. Gambling in sport is enormous. So hopefully that should help you further with your own ideas. So strong responses have appropriate use of language techniques. So things like metaphor are used sparingly and correctly. Planned and clear sequence of ideas, a sense of momentum. So your article builds to something. It builds to something interesting. Accurate use of vocabulary and a range of punctuation. So again, an ellipsis maybe, or a semicolon, or a colon. The correct use of speech marks if you're quoting an expert. Things to avoid. Don't pack your piece of writing with language techniques. Do not think that by using lots and lots of different techniques you will automatically get more marks. It's about using a few techniques sensibly and accurately. Be careful if you know a word but you're not entirely sure of its meaning to use them, and to use lots of words like that. If you're fairly certain, it is better to take a chance, but again, if you know lots and lots of words without being confident on them, it can make the meaning of your work difficult to understand. And then without planning, your article can become very random. Those who are more selective in which aspect they addressed tended to produce clearer points of view in their responses. This is from the examiner's report. So it kind of goes back to when we talk about analysis, write a lot about a little. Really expanding upon a few clear points will make your work not only easier to read, but will feel more sophisticated. If you have dozens of things to say and you jump from each one randomly, that's not what they want to see. They want to see you really expanding on your ideas, expanding on things that you care about as well. I mean, if you don't care about sport, then it can be a rant against sport perhaps, but it's got to be controlled, developed, thoughtful. So with this in mind, I'm only going to focus on football and boxing. I think between these two, I can talk about an awful lot of different things, and I think I can make a really focused and interesting answer. You might want to do the same thing, or you might want to talk about something completely different. That's absolutely fine. Please remember today, Year 10, this is just about understanding the criteria of the question. I'm not asking you to do any written work today. However, you may want to come back to this video when you are asked to write your own response. It will be included in Show My Homework. This is my plan. The stand first. Sport is all about money these days. Boxing was a good thing because, I'll expand that. Football was a good thing because. Boxing and football are both corrupt because. The sport can still be saved because. If you notice, I have a short opening paragraph, 3 main paragraphs, and then a concluding paragraph. In each of those paragraphs, there's a clear focus, something I want to talk about and why. And it progresses. A summary at the start. Boxing's good, football's good, they've both become corrupt because, and then my positive conclusion. So a clear plan will pay you back. Taking those few minutes to plan things out will pay you back because you can keep referring to it. You have that as a foundation, as a structure that you can build from, a skeleton that you can put flesh on the bones. Those of you tempted to use this opening sentence, please don't. Okay, I agree, disagree with this statement because it is such a bad idea. Please do not do that. It is forbidden. What can you use? An interesting opening sentence, and I will show you what I mean again in a moment. As you notice here, I have a headline with a rhetorical question. Can sport be saved? It's thought-provoking, it's a hook into the article. I then have my stand first, which I'll read in a moment. I then have a couple of subheadings. Again, if you don't feel confident about subheadings, do not agonize over them. Okay, but because I planned, it feels easier to now write subheadings. So I have the sweet science, which is what boxing is called sometimes, and the beautiful game, which is what football is called sometimes. Because remember, these two paragraphs are supposed to be positive. So I'll just read the stand first to you. Sports such as football and boxing not only entertain millions of people, they can lift young men and women out of poverty and give structure and hope to many more young people. However, with big business and corruption rife in both pursuits, can these sports be saved? So what I've done there is I've talked about why I think football and boxing are a good idea in brief. And then I've raised the issue that I want to discuss as well. I will then, of course, talk about the sweet science or boxing, then the beautiful game or football and why they're a good thing. And then I would move on to the corruption and then whether I think they can be saved. So year 10, the last task I want you to do is to think about your own plan. How would you answer this question? Do you think sport is fun, fair and open to everyone? Do you think it's full of money, corruption and winning at any cost? Try and think of arguments for both sides. Remember, it's about being interesting and entertaining for your reader, exploring the issue with them. Thank you very much for watching Year 10. I hope this video was educational and informative. Remember, there'll be other tasks throughout the week to support your learning. Thank you.